So first, a bit of housekeeping as usual.
I'll go from there. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so everybody else is on mute, just so that we can hear you speak. Oh, you still there with us? You just frozen a little bit.
Okay.
Right.
Yep, I'm still here.
Perfect, it's back now. Yeah, so again, as per normal, if anybody has any questions during the session, then just drop them in the chat box, which is just at the bottom. Probably all familiar with that right now, so so just drop them in there, and we'll get to those, and we'll kind of answer them as and when we can, if there are any questions. And yeah, if you want to come on face to face and ask questions as well, that's all good. Just kind of make it known. And so for you as well, Tonia, to get to know what this is about, I know you know a little bit, but it's kind of all about self-rediscovery. And for me, that's kind of twofold. So it's kind of, I think a lot of people come to self-rediscovery thinking that it's about kind of finding out who we are and who we want to be, and the kind of life that we want to create. And so it is partly about that for me, but it's also all about kind of seeing who we are beyond that. So kind of in our wisdom, in our flow. So I'm intrigued how that's going to play out with the subject of money. So yeah, it'll be interesting. And so yeah, we've basically been doing this lots of different speakers, lots of different subjects, and it's my hope that I guess people can begin to make sense of all these different topics in their own lives, and see how people have maybe suffered with them and how they've then kind of found that freedom. And so and to kind of give them the possibility that there is, we can just unravel a life we love rather than kind of doing too much forcing and and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I've been exploring loads of different topics. We're live most Fridays until the end of March. And then if people haven't been able to catch it live here, it's available in the member vault as well on the replay after, so people can catch up. And there are a lot of people doing that, which is really cool to see. And so if there are any questions, I'm kind of there on hand to answer them, and also jumping on live in the Self-Rediscovery Facebook group. So it's really, really cool. And we're really lucky to have you here today. So yeah, I'm gonna introduce you a little bit. You're dubbed the Money Whisperer, which I thought was super cool. Yeah, so we can hear a bit more about that. I met you at an event last year, didn't I? And I just loved your energy. So when we had a little chat, I thought, right, this lady's good for the summit. She'll be a good one to listen to and delve into. And I think money is an interesting topic because people often have a lot of thinking about money and kind of get lost in that. So we'll dive into that. But first off, I was just going to introduce you really, because I know you had a lovely bio. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that.
Go for it. Go for it.
Tonia loves supporting people turn many problems into a life well lived. She believes we're all born unique, each with our own special gifts. And ever since she was a little girl, she knew her superpower was money wisdom. She says, hell, my favourite childhood toy was a cash register. She says, not the most playful gift, but it did lead her to have a lifelong empowered relationship with finances, an industry in which she's worked for 2 decades. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, her early career was spent in a bank, but she began to see something different that helped people tune into their own wisdom about personal finances. She has a unique understanding about money that helps her clients remove stress, gain clarity and harmony with their financial flow, leading to a productive, balanced life. Dubbed the Money Whisperer, she's in tune with what people need to know to have a healthy relationship with money habits, and helps people transform their lives to bring joy into their financial future. Wow.
I'm like, that sounds great. Not a big task at all.
I know, exactly. So yeah, we're just going to dive into that really, I think. I know people like a bit of a shared personal story, so I just thought I'd invite you to start off with by just telling us a little bit about your own kind of personal journey. I don't know if that's, whether you've got a personal journey where you ever suffered with money and kind of saw something different, or, whether that's with clients, or just how you got to where you got to today with your understanding about money would be really cool to hear, I think.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, my story is, and how I got here is absolutely ingrained with my story, and my experience of money. And that's what I do now, teach with money. So Yeah, 2 decades in doing money itself. So I say money whisperer now because I feel like money tells me a story. And I've always heard this story. But throughout my life, it's these two different stories that were being told to me. And earlier on, I was very much so a controller. And when I got out of school, it was very much so business. I wanted to be a CEO and I wanted to just run things and just very determined and on that path of the checklist, the salary, the house, get married, have kids, just, knock it out of the park that way, not really recognizing what that meant. It was just a to-do list that I followed and very much so using money to sort of manipulate my life in a way. Like I was very good at manifesting, although I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And I
Yeah.
would go in and I would get a job and I would work really hard and I would have a goal in mind and I was amazing at goal setting. And I would reach the goal and I wouldn't really be satisfied. I'd be happy for the second and then all of a sudden it would be gone. And then I realized that this was the pattern. And so it took me from like graduating college and I had about 3 jobs in between until I opened my own business, which was a title company, which is in real estate that taught me a lot about money. And then I was an assistant finance director for a nonprofit. And in doing those jobs, I just kept climbing to where it was. I would hit the top and then I just would be stopped by what I can make and having someone else tell me what I could do with myself and with my time, in which I think the most valuable thing we have is actually time, which is also why I love working with money.
Mm.
So at this point is when I came across and I started to see that I'm like, okay, I'm not happy with this money thing and chasing this illusion of just having a dollar amount. I'm going to work for myself because really what I value is my time. So I'm going to open up my business and I mapped it out and I figured out how much money I needed to save. And so at 30, I opened up my own business, but it was an organizing business. I didn't want anything to do with money anymore. I was like, I'm done. I was like, I don't want to do it. It's, too intense. I'm like, I know that I love to organize and, on the most stressful time of my life, which was during 9/11, which I was there in front of the building and saw, I
Wow.
organized. Yeah. And so like, it's funny throughout our lives, you realize that there are certain occasions that have a real impact and that impact sometimes can show what's next, and that time I was very sad, but in that time I was organizing and it calmed me down. So I'm like, if I could do something that I love day in and day out, then that's the problem fixed. Like I'm doing a life that I love. And so I opened up the organizing business, but it didn't stop there. This is where money really started to speak to me. And I came up with like a methodology in working with it because as I went into people's homes, I saw that there was the disorganization and there would be paperwork stacked up, like mail not being opened. And this is 7 years ago, so it wasn't paperless statements weren't such a big thing then. So it was mail that was there. And I would just see the mail, or if I was doing closets, I would see price tags on things like things weren't worn or duplicates of things. And my mind would instantly go to, wow, I wonder what this is costing the person. And I would constantly hear, I can't save, or I don't have money to do fun things, or I can't buy. And so I started to organize personal finances. And I was like, do you have a budget? Do you know what your expenses are? Do you know what your income is? And a lot of the time people didn't know what it was. And I'm, like I said, very logical, very organized. And so I always had a budget. So I just knew that this wasn't the case. So I started doing personal. Did I freeze?
A little bit, but I
Okay.
think good.
Yeah, because I just saw the connection thing. So I was like, let me stop for a minute. So I started to see that the finances were sort of not known. And I did this. And the thing that was important about this part of the story is that this was the linchpin because once the finances were organized, my client would text me and then they would show me pictures of their house that they started organizing. Now that the finances were organized, they started to feel motivated to do other things. And so this is how the story starts to unfold and evolve, where I then went into businesses and organized the finances there. And this is still very logical, what I started to learn with money. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to see that you could have the greatest plan and everything else, but the plan still isn't being followed. I didn't understand why after there was this, the actions weren't being taken. And then this is when I learned that there's beliefs that are behind it. And there's certain beliefs that have us not taking action. And so I kept following it along. And then this is where the intuition part started to come in. This is where the wisdom part started to come in. And I started to really learn about the law of attraction and energy work, and money started to show me a completely different way that it operates, that through the logical side of budgets and everything else, without the manifestation part, we sort of use money to manipulate and get what we want, but that money really isn't happiness. And so it was through all of that that I started to learn, like, okay, money is just a tool and to be used to get what we want, but underneath, we have to know what we want. And vision is so important, and learning what happiness and all of that. So it's pretty much through my 7 years of having my organizing business that I actually came up with now this money methodology and like money wisdom and this whole picture, where that's why I'm like, it's a whisper in a way, because it was like little by little, money's like, hey, people have the wrong image of me. Like, I'm really not uptight. I really like to play. I really like to have fun. And so this is now what I go forward and teach. And it was very much so my personal journey too, that took me through all of this to show me the way. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a lot of my story in learning all of this.
Wow, there's so much in that. I kind of don't even know where to begin. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's so interesting. I kind of love when you started. You said you kind of saw, like, you had different stories about it. It's like you saw money in two different ways. And what I love about
Mhm.
that, I think what I share is all about kind of how the mind works, and like much like you said, kind of the beliefs that we have. And what I love about you seeing the two different contrasting kind of thoughts about money, I guess, is almost like, if there are two different thoughts, how can one be real? If the
Mhm.
if one was truth, then the other one kind of wouldn't exist, if that makes sense.
No,
Um,
it does. It makes absolute sense.
yeah, and I kind of guess you kind of saw two different things. One was kind of a very logical way of working with money, and one was a more intuitive kind of wisdom built way. And I guess you kind of need the two, and that's kind of what I was pointing to when we started this conversation of like self-rediscovery is kind of twofold. Because for me, it's like, well, we're human, we have to live in a world where money exists, and we have to play with it, and manage it and all of that sort of stuff. um but then equally, there's this wisdom that's kind of letting it unfold for us as well. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, I guess, with your methodology. Is almost like that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. That's exactly what it is. That's what, and it happened over 7 years of showing like a two different stories. Because, like you said, how could one be true if there's two of them? But it's what I call this harmony. Because it's, if you look at it this way, it's the masculine and the feminine.
Mm.
And when the masculine and the feminine come together, there's harmony. So the masculine side is the logical side, and the feminine side is the intuitive side. So you kind of need both in order to have a healthy and harmonious relationship with money. And so that's what was, I guess, revealed to me or shown to me with money, that in the world that we live in, it's very much so on the masculine side. And we need this in order to have it, or it's the fear of it is used in order to keep people stuck or to have power over certain things. And it's sort of like, in that world, it has a bad rap or a bad name, in which that's not the case. Where if we then go on to like the feminine side or on the intuitive side, money really is just an energy. Money is just an expression of love and a way to say thank you. It's an exchanging of services. And when we look at it that way, it releases the power of what it is. But you need both. Like, you could stay in the energy of money, but what I've learned with working with people who are abundant but aren't so much having the logical side, which I mean is like the practical and the budget, is that there's some really great tools on this side that could really support that and have your money grow and have money working for you.
Mm.
And on the logical side, if you're not using the intuition and the law of attraction, like, you're hustling all the time. It's so hard, and it's survival mode. And it's when you bring the two together that there's just like this really cool dance that money does. And it's just a really fun way of seeing it. And it really shocked me when I saw it too. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much more here.
Yeah, I know. And for me, it is about seeing something different. And I guess if you're kind of only playing in the humanness of it, then you're not seeing something there. And if you're only kind of dancing in the flow, then almost there's something to be seen there as well. And
Hmm.
it just feels like there's always something to be seen in a way. What I kind of liked is what you're talking about. I think you said at the start the word illusion. And one of the things I've heard before about money along my own journey is kind of like money, which kind of blew my mind, is that money is really an illusion.
Yep.
And so I wondered if we could dive into exploring that a little bit for people here, if they kind of don't get what that really means. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think when somebody's explaining it to me, it's like really, it's just a set of thinking we have about a collection of notes of paper, or, you know, a bank balance that we see electronically, or, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it that you kind of mean by it's an illusion, or is, you know, it's a tool, not a currency, I think you say on your website.
Yeah. Like trying to see where do I want to begin with this. I think the biggest illusion, there's two of them that come to mind, but the biggest illusion is this notion that money equals happiness.
Mm.
And that once we have a certain amount, we will be happy and everything else. And that's actually not the case. Money can't bring us that we could only cultivate for ourselves. And I think, Nicole, this is where I relate to so much of what the work that you're doing, because it's almost like through money is where I start to teach people how to just tap into happiness within themselves, because money can't do that. I know that on the TV, you have to realize there's billions of dollars in marketing that goes into making us think that we need all of these things in order to be happy. So it's really easy to believe that, but all the things in the world can't give it. It could give us a momentary sense of that, but it doesn't create the feeling of happiness. Like only we could do that. And that's truly what abundance is. When
Mm.
we learn to see, like if you're out in nature and if you've ever been around flowers or in the most joyful moment, like that's abundance. And it has absolutely nothing to do with money or a value of money. And I think that that right there is the biggest illusion, is thinking that a dollar amount or something like that actually equates into our self-worth. That's another huge one. As if you get a salary increase, that's what it is. Or someone else is worth more value because they have a higher salary than someone else. Like, that's not how money works. It doesn't work that way. Value doesn't get equated by a dollar amount. Money is just a tool, like a car is. It gets us from one point to another. And when we just learn to start using it in that way, it just becomes uh, very neutral in the way that we do need it in the world. We do need it to pay rent. We do need it to, to pay bills. Like we do need it in the world. I'm not saying that it's an illusion that you could just survive in this world without. It really doesn't have to. We just start using it as a tool to get to what we want. And that's where the law of attraction and what we think comes in, where you can actually think a dollar amount, and that dollar amount will start coming in if your mindset is thought a certain way and you realize like we actually create our lives and what we want to see in it, if
Yeah,
that makes
it's
sense.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think we can dive a bit more into kind of your interpretation of the law of attraction. But for me, it's almost like there's just this, we just need to stay open to the possibility of what's possible in a way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in when I share kind of my understanding is it's called the three principles that I share. And it's very much this coming back to like money can't make you happy. I think that's a really crucial thing about money actually when exploring it, because for me, I think we call it kind of in the three principles, it's like this, it's an inside out understanding, like everything we need
Mm-hmm.
is already within us.
Yep.
And that's, you know, still the case with money, and in that, you know, money is still external to us. It still can't make us happy, and it can't make us sad, you know. That is already within
Mm-hmm.
us. And I think that kind of, again, you linked that with abundance, like we're all abundant, we're all born abundant, and it's just like we then develop this set of beliefs that, you know, we're not. And and I think when you can kind of get caught in, you know, many problems perhaps that we're not, you know, necessarily we're struggling with in our humanness, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, then that can be difficult to see. So maybe we'll dive into that later as well. But yeah, I thought that was a really nice point. It's like happiness can't come from the money. It's still something
Nope.
that's outside. It's like,
It's I think that that is the biggest illusion of it all, besides, you know, the worth that people attach to money and everything else. But the happiness thing is a huge one. And it's like I said, you saying like coming from a place of open is what I also have as my interpretation of the law of attraction. I believe, you know, if you are open or coming from a place of love, that's why you'll hear me use abundance. But like my main thing of why I work with money is because I love to have people um, activate their joy. And what I found is like money is a really big pain point that blocks people from their joy, which is that's why it's been the platform that I've used. But really what it comes from is coming through the lens of joy, because when you come from anything that's a high vibration, that's how I look at the law of attraction. If you're coming from all of these higher vibes, that's what you're going to bring into your life naturally. And that's where ease plays, that's when you hear all those words and that. Whereas I believe scarcity is when we're just, or, survival mode and the mindset of money, when we're in a place of just seeing all we don't have, is when we're in a scarcity mindset, and we could
Yeah.
attract or start seeing more of that. And that's really where the mind comes in. It's just a matter of what we choose to put our attention and focus on. The
Yeah.
world
Kind
isn't
of.
showing us any different.
Yeah, in that, to me, that looks like in the moment we're in our heads or in our thinking and really not seeing the truth. For me, that's how I would
Yes.
describe that. And I guess I
Mm-hmm.
always point to the fact that when we're talking about wisdom, everybody has different words or different ways that they can kind of
Yep.
define that. So I guess law of attraction is just another way of defining wisdom, or flow, or some people call it love, like you mentioned, love as well, or nature.
Yep.
It's like that
Mm-hmm.
natural intelligence that's always there, I guess, that's kind of
Yeah.
living us. And I guess that's,
Yeah.
law of attraction is another label almost for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just another way to, I guess, another teaching point, like it's wisdom, but then having a way to share it so that it's understand and then able to take in. Because I mean, that's what I do with my clients too, where it's like how you empower is by explaining what it is and coming up with a concept, and having that so that we could then take that information and start using it in our life to see what works for us. Because some things work for one, don't work for another. So it's finding our own unique recipes to find what our happiness is and then using it in a certain way versus this cookie
Yeah,
cutter.
and our own way of
Doesn't work.
understanding it as well, our own way of figuring it out. Yeah, I like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also like what you said actually about thank you. It's like money's just a thank you, because I remember I was at an event once and somebody was speaking about they were really struggling with money, and they had lost their job, and it all looked very bleak, and they'd phoned up their friend and sort of talked about it and said, what am I going to do? I've got no money left. And they're like, I don't see your problem. And she was like, what do you mean you don't see my problem? Like, I've got no money and I've got bills going out and all of this. And I think somebody just said to them, money's just thank you notes. Just go get some more. And then it's like, and that made her realize, like, oh, like that's different to what I've had before. And I just wondered, kind of, again, because you kind of pointed to that, is that what do you see about the ease of and flow of money, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way that I have or that I use is to connect to your breath. That's the flow of money. Like as you breathe in, it comes out. So that's what money does. Like in order for us to have money come in, we also have to not be holding on to it so tightly. Can't be saving it and not releasing it in the world. Like the flow is in and out. And it's, a saying that I use with my clients, like money flows to me as easily as my breath,
Mm.
because it does. And as we give out, it comes back to us. So it's in the giving that we receive and it's in the receiving that we give.
Yeah.
So it might sound a little, but that's exactly it. It's just the way that we think about it. If we think that money's not going to come to us, guess what? You'll be right. Money won't come to you, just like the way you just said about that story of the woman or man, whoever, I don't know if I had that right.
Yeah,
But if you really do think that money isn't going to come, then it's not going to. It really it does come behind what we think is what's going to happen. So thinking of money as a gratitude always leads to abundance.
yeah. And I
So
guess really, if somebody is giving you money, it's for something that you're exchanging. So it is literally a thank you note. It's like, oh, there you go. Oh, thank you.
that's and then that's what it was really created for. They were using people would barter, and then they would use gold to exchange, and then gold wasn't really that convenient to exchange, and then so they created money as a way to just say, hey, I value your services, here you go. It really is a thank you. And it's something that I do personally myself. I do all the time when I pay my bills. I say thank you for each thing that I'm paying out. So if it's my rent, I'm like, thank you for this roof over my head. And I thank my landlord. If I'm paying my electricity, I say thank you, to the electrical company for putting my lights on. And I really start to look at it as a way to say thank you. And then it makes spending money really fun, because it's like, oh, here you go. Here's thank you. Thank you for your wonderful services. And then when we receive it back, that's a way that someone is saying thank you to us too. So receiving that as well, because receiving is a really, really big one. And sometimes, that it took me a while to learn how to receive graciously and
Yeah.
accept it, versus feeling guilty in receiving and being like, no, 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 I don't want that. But
Yeah, I think
the,
that's another really interesting point, because I think, like, again, a lot of people can kind of have that kind of block almost, or that, not seeing that they're just not open to receiving in a way. And that can be sometimes another lot of thinking that's often around many, is like that worthiness of kind
yes.
of, do we deserve money, or or I don't know,
Mhm.
it's just something that came to mind as you were kind of saying that. And also when you were kind of talking about that, then again, it kind of like how money was created, it just reminded me again that it is just an illusion, because like originally we were just exchanging, I don't know, goats for vegetables or something like this.
Yeah,
And then
it's
we were like,
true.
oh, that's not going to work for the rest of time, so we need to create some kind of system that's that's in place to make that a bit different. But yeah, that's quite interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's interesting. And going back to the, when you say it kind of flows in and out, I kind of had the same realization. I remember being by the ocean, and I could just hear the waves kind of coming in
Mhm.
and then going out. And I was like, oh, that's just like money. Like it just flows in and it flows out, and it flows in and it flows out. And I was like, I had this really kind of, going back to what you said about it being neutral. It's like before, at times in my life, I've had a lot of thinking about money where it hasn't felt neutral. And that's often, to
Mhm.
me, a pointer that I'm in my thinking and in my head. But at that point, it just felt very neutral. And I was like, oh, and that was, again, kind of another pointer that I was more in my wisdom about money at that point. It was like,
Yep.
it's just a flow. It's just kind of happening. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I kind of like that. And I know on your website, you kind of talk a little bit about, or you I don't know, what you talk about kind of makes it feel effortless. So I guess, how would you, if people aren't finding it effortless, like how would you address that with them and help them?
Well, the way I break down money too is that I mean, this is the easiest way to do it, that there's 4 stages, well, 5 stages that I found when it comes to money. And the first one is focus, right? And in this stage, it's really about the organization of money. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because whoever's listening can relate to like what stage they're in. And then this could support them in the challenge that they're having behind money. So if they relate to it, like, oh, this is the thing that I need to do in order to overcome the challenge that I'm having. And usually in the focus stage, a lot of the challenge that I've found people have is the I don't know. I don't know what my finances are. I don't know what my expenses are. I don't know what my income is. A lot of the story that's running, because really a lot of money challenges are just the stories that we have behind it. And so it's figuring out what's the story that's creating that challenge, or what's not working. And so in the focus stage, really what ends up releasing that or coming out of that fog, if you don't know what your finances are, if you're having problems around it, is organization. And it's really just about identifying our finances and knowing what our numbers are. The hard thing could be about that is sometimes we don't want to know what that is, because the thing is with money, as much as we're talking about, the wisdom and the flow, and it sounds really easy, it, that's the end result. At the end of the day, money really is emotionally charged. And that's what causes most of the challenge, because what we do is we have associated feelings with it. Like a lot of the feelings are shame, guilt, or not feeling like we're smart enough or worthy, and all of that. And so a lot of the time, it's these feelings that have us being challenged, because we're making up these stories, or these are the feelings that are coming up
Yeah,
when,
I think
I don't know, paying the bills. And so that is a big one.
for me, I think what I've heard about that, other people saying about that before, and I myself, so I share about where feelings come from, and feelings are always usually coming from a thought. So again, it's almost like when we're in that kind of worry and fear about money, it's almost still coming from our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just seeing that, I think, can help. And it's almost like, whilst we do want to look and kind of figure out what's going on with our money, I think that is kind of important because we're human and we live in life and we have to pay for things. It's kind of also like, don't get too caught up in it, in a way. It's like, once you've figured that out, like, look upstream to the flow and where the creativity can come in. I don't know what you feel about that.
No, that's exactly it. That's the whole point of the stages. It goes
Right.
focus, foundation, freedom, and flow.
Yeah.
So one, and they do go in order. In the beginning, it's the order because it's through that you get to flow.
Yeah.
Because once you do the focus and you have the organization, what ends up happening is you have clarity. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is my situation.
Through
It is what
awareness,
it is.
I guess. Through awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then that's the acceptance piece that comes in. And that's what and I feel like that's where the empowerment comes in, and the removing of the illusion of money, where you're just like, okay, money's a tool, just like a thermometer. It's either hot or cold, something's working and it isn't. That's all the money is saying. And that's it. And if we start looking at it in a neutral way, or as a thermometer, that the numbers are just telling us this isn't working or this is working, do more of this. If there's an influx, or hey, there's a negative amount, like, all right, maybe we don't like this, maybe something needs to get changed. And that's all money's trying to tell us.
Yeah.
Not that we're unworthy or we're doing it wrong or anything like that. It's just trying to show us we're going in the wrong direction or right direction.
And I can relate to that through because when I was younger, I got ill with chronic fatigue, and I very much like had a lot of thinking about my body and my body's wisdom, and it's kind of the same thing, really. It's like my body was just pointing me in a different way. It's like, no, this isn't working anymore. Like, you're exhausted and you're burning yourself out with the life that you're living. And it was really just like, no, just listen. And that's all that money's doing, really, is going, no, hey, listen, this isn't quite working as it's going. Like, do something else.
Exactly. And, that's why I say money whisperer, because it's a really fun way of just seeing them. Like, when I look at numbers, I just see it telling a story.
Yeah.
I don't have the emotions attached to it. I don't have the stories attached to it. I just see it telling a story, and the story of just how to get to the life that lights you up and you're most passionate about. But you do have to uproot the emotions that are attached to it in order to be free of, the stories that we grew up with, because we do, part of this stage too is also, I do like a money history. And I ask, what was the beliefs of your parents and how did you grow up? Because, for anyone who's done the work or has gone through transforming and all of that, like, our first beliefs come through in like the first 7 years of our life. So we take on a lot of our parents and our environment. So it's kind of like cleaning out that closet so that we could then create our own story and our own narrative that we now want to relate to money, versus the one that we inherited, or the world's we took on from the world.
I think for me, that process is just like illuminating. It's almost like it's just showing us showing us something we haven't seen. So I guess that's for me where a lot of the insight comes in. It's like, oh, that makes sense why I would think like that now. but almost like, I found when I started to see that thinking, it kind of almost falls away, because you're like, oh, I've seen that. And then you kind of don't think in the same way. It's like, oh, there's a different way. Yeah. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, you're able to like shift out of it. Like, a lot of my story in like beginning of my, I don't know, my life, but like a big part of it was I didn't know how to operate without money. Like, my family is from Italy. I'm first generation. And so there is that immigrant mentality where my parents just saved and saved money. So I would have it where I would save, work hard, follow a job. And, that's what money is for. They just get things done. But it wasn't a lot of enjoyment in it. There would be certain things that I learned to do, but it was still this very controlled way of doing it. And at a certain point, I would have money saved and I was just stressing myself out, the same as you, almost burning out. And I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like, why? Like, when I really asked myself the question, like, do I really want a house? Do I really want all of these things? Or is it just something that I subscribe to? And so the biggest thing that I've learned now is like, I unsubscribe. Like, I check it off like an email and I'm just like, I unsubscribe to that. That's not what I want. And I think the greatest thing for people to start learning too, and what I learned for myself, is maybe I'm happy at 30,000. Maybe 30,000 is my $1 million number. Like, there
Yeah.
isn't a set thing for everyone. You know, there isn't this 6 figures and you're happy, 7 figures and you're happy. The whole point is for each one of us to discern what our happy number is. And then that's where money starts to come in and flow with us, and knowing what that is versus following a script that really wasn't ours, that we just sort of took on because who is really talking about this? Like, how do we know otherwise?
Yeah, I love that. And I think again I can relate to that in that I kind of advise clients to like dream about what they want and then allow it to unfold. So I'm intrigued what the kind of later steps of your of your
Yeah,
thing is.
that's why I love it, because it naturally goes into that's what foundation is. And so when we get to the second stage now, foundation is all about visioning and, and creating, right? Because now that we know what the story is, because we cleaned it up in the focus and you have the clarity, now we start talking about what do you want to create for yourself? What makes you happy? And stop anyone from dreaming, and even if it is material things, but really what I like to anchor into is like, what is the feeling? You know, what's the thing that you want to feel? And the question that I ask is, if you were standing at the end of this year, what feelings or what would make you most proud or make you feel your heart sing? What things would have happened in order for you to have that feeling? And then right away people are like, oh, being free, or you know, feeling peace around this. And then diving into, all right, so now how do you get to that peace? What's standing in the way of that peace? And it's like, oh, well, maybe organizing my finances, getting another job. And it's just starting to unpack all of the things that are in the way of it. But it's attaching to that vision that really has the new life and the new habits that starts to come in, right? 'Cause it's our thinking that has our actions really and what gets manifested in our life. So it's having the vision, but then also coming up with a plan in order to support that vision. And so that there's actionable goals that happen in order for that vision to start coming to life. But without the vision, none of it is possible. Like, we
Yeah.
need to create a new reality.
Yeah, and what comes to mind there is like because the wisdom that I share, I guess, is like there's nothing to do in order to feel okay. And it's coming back to that money isn't going to create happiness, but it's still again that like we can still play in it to create what we want. And I remember when I first came across this understanding, you know, everyone would say, well, there's nothing to do, like we're you know, there's nothing to do. And so at first I was kind of like, cool, there's nothing to do, like I don't have to do anything ever again, it's all just going to come to me, like I'm just going to sit here, let it all flow. And then they kind of clarified and went, no, there's nothing to do to be psychologically okay. I was like,
Yeah.
oh right, okay, so I still create, right?
But exactly, and that's what it is. And it is, that's the balance, right? Is also knowing when there needs a beingness that has to happen, and then the doingness that has to happen, and just learning when to push the pedal on one and then push the pedal on the other. Because there is, if we don't also learn how to just be and know that we could have this life and really believe that and be at peace with ourselves, none of it is going to happen, because there's so many things that are standing in the way. We actually don't believe that we're going to have that vision. So learning first to just have that sense of being, and that's why the freedom part comes up next. Because what ends up happening is we create this vision and it's like, oh, everything is great, like everything's going to flow. And then what ends up happening is, oh, there's these beliefs that start to creep in now that realize like the thinking isn't actually in alignment with that vision. And so it's in this phase of really starting to unpack the 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 negative thinking, right? Like you say, like with the wisdom that you're teaching people is that they don't have to do anything. But in order to get to that phase is really starting to be like, what are all the things that I really believe that I have to do? Or what am I equating into? What's the story behind I'm not able to do something?
Yeah,
And so
I think what kind of came out of my understanding with that is it's like there's nothing to do in terms of like changing our thoughts. And I know we can kind of play with changing our thoughts, but it's like they, when we see them as well, I think they do just generally kind of fall away almost, and we're left with
Mhm.
openness for new thought as well. And I'm kind of intrigued, like, because I know one of your later steps you talk about fun as well, and I think that,
Always fun.
yeah, I think that's a big thing to kind of delve into, because like what I realized as I was doing was it was almost like yeah, there was still stuff to do, but it was more stuff from fun, for a place of fun and joy. And so I was kind of moved in a different way. It was like, well, yeah, there is still stuff to do, but what do I want to do? It's like that choice came back as well. It's like before, like very much like you, I was just, plodding along in my career, trying to get as much money as possible to buy a house. And it moved very much from that to like, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to create?
Yeah. Yeah, everything is about following your joy and following the fun. That's why I have fun. Like there's these four phases, but if fun doesn't exist in every single one, then there's no point in doing it at
Yeah.
all.
That's
Because
why I kind of like that you had it as like this fifth step in brackets. Because I was
yeah.
like, yeah.
Well, because it's not really a step. It's a way of being for life.
Yeah.
Like it's not it, it's if not coming through that lens always, then everything else is sort of but when we come from curiosity, when we come from fun and play, then we're always just in a space of love and abundance. And so if we could just operate from that place always, then there is nothing that we have to do. The whole thing is
Getting.
if we're not from that place, finding out what's standing in the way from us being in that place. Because once we operate from fun and play, everything else just falls in alignment. It's literally the magic of life. It's like, oh my God, I don't have to do anything. Like everything happens for me. Right? Like
Yeah.
it's the most magical thing in the world. I'm like, oh my, why aren't they teaching this? Like, why isn't this being spoken about? Like that all you have to do is do what you love, and that everything else falls into place after that. Like everything else is just natural. And then all we have to do is just be in that receptive mode to listen to what is being shown to us, and that wisdom and everything else.
Yeah, I love that. And it's that deep listening, again, coming back to that deep listening. And I think that's kind of what this conversation does, is it offers that deep listening to how it works, really, how it really works. That's what I
Yeah.
kind of love about it. It's like staying in this conversation is just what we need, really, because it's just
Yep.
constantly reminding us that that is the truth. It's like that abundance that I use the word curiosity as well. So I love that you kind of say it's just like staying curious and seeing that,
Hmm.
we're love and abundance at our core. That is who we are. And that's kind of what I was pointing to with like self-rediscovery of who we really are beyond all our thoughts of who we are.
Yeah, but that's what it is. And it's like, if we don't know who, I find a lot that people who haven't found an abundant place, they have a hard time getting through all of their thoughts. And so it's like, teaching how to get there. But I'm like, then the easiest way to get there is just go into nature. Like
Yeah.
go into nature and just sit there and just listen. That's abundance. Like the trees, the leaves, when you look at snowflakes and they fall down, like it's just abundant. I mean, I say it even like our natural resource falls out of the sky. Water falls out of the sky. It's something that we need to live. Like nature is abundant. And nature is our greatest teacher of abundance.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I totally agree with that. Like, and for me, it's just that reminder of this natural intelligence that's constantly living
yes,
everything. Like, that's really abundantly clear.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's like, yeah, it's just happening, and that's the same for us. That's how it works.
Hmm.
Apart from our thinking, like when we don't see it, we get caught in it. But that's fine too, because we're human.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, is that we are human and there are certain things that exist. And that's the whole thing of why I love talking about money, because it's like, well, we really, yeah, we're talking about money, but we're really not. The whole point of it is to look at it as a tool. And
Yeah,
once we could start looking at it that way, it releases its power. It's like once we could see it in that way, something new starts to come forward. And it's like, oh, it's about abundance, it's about play, and about trusting that
mm,
I have everything I need, and that includes money. So if I just really believe that and are clear on what I will be provided for. Like, and so will money will be with that as well. Like I will be provided for, and money is a part of that too.
yeah. And we're really just, again, like with all the different topics, we're really just talking about the same thing, but with different topics. It's like the same wisdom in every area of our lives. So it's just, again, it's like you say, it's just that tool. Money's just a tool.
Hmm.
So yeah, what are the rest of the steps?
So I think so foundation is where, the vision, right? Because the vision is very important in creating the new reality of what we want. And then it goes into freedom, right? Because now that we have this new vision, we have a freedom. And what ends up happening is during freedom, we're trying to get, start taking the steps in order to have this new life in an abundant way. Emotions start to come up. And it's another, money is emotionally charged, whether it is or not. Like, a lot of feelings come up. So at this phase is to start listening to the feelings that come up, acknowledge them, because that's how they get released. And so once this process goes on in moving into the new way, we just see everything that's, I don't want to say standing in the way of it, but the emotions that are attached to the way that we were thinking. And like you said, nothing really needs to be done. They just want to be heard. So once we hear what the story is, they get released. And that's why it's freedom, because it's the listening to these feelings that allow them to be released, which then leads us into flow. And it's a natural process that just goes into it. And so once we make these emotions our friends and we're not afraid of them, and some of them might be shame, guilt, anger, and it's the hardest phase because emotions are real and they feel very real and they get hurt when feeling them, but once acknowledged, they're gone. And
Yeah.
so it's just asking them to come through and sort of like share what they want to share with us.
Yeah, I love that. And a big thing that I share is like what was Sydney Banks, who kind of came up with the three principles, talks about like, if only we knew not to be scared of our experience of life, like that would change the world. And that's one of my
Yep.
favorite quotes, because it's like, we don't need to be scared, because it's all kind of just coming from our thinking. But yeah, it's amazing. And what I like in that is there's like this sense of trust and acceptance as well,
Yep.
with that kind of, yeah, with seeing that. It's like, and I think that's huge, because we were built to born with whatever, to deal with whatever we kind of experience, and we have got the answers, so we don't really need to be frightened of it. And if we just listen deeply enough, there will be an answer that comes up that's like, oh, that's a new solution, I could do that.
Exactly. And it's that trusting of and not avoiding it or being afraid of it or making up whatever it is. It's just listening to it with, and this is why I like using the word neutral, just in a neutral tone. Like, it's just telling something, and then it just then gets released. And again, it's the same thing with money, has that way of doing it. It's an emotionally charged thing. It's why it's such a real challenge and such a pain point it can be in life. And again, we need it for certain things, but once we start to become friends with the emotions, it actually becomes quite fun to play with it and just start realizing like, oh, okay, this doesn't mean anything. Like, as a kid, someone said no and I made something up about it. And that's not true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely not a true story.
Oh, you're frozen.
And then you could just rewrite the story into one that works and just be like, it's like, that's not the case. And then you could just move forward, realizing the truth that.
Oh, I think we've lost you there. You've frozen a little bit. Oh, there we go. Go back. Now might be a good point, actually, whilst we're
Am I
waiting.
back? Yeah, I know when it freezes,
It's still frozen.
it's raining
Ah,
over
maybe.
here, so I know that
If
could.
anybody has any questions at this point, do just drop them in the group chat, because it might be quite a good point to kind of start to address some questions if there are any. Have we got you back now, Tonia? Oh, I can see you. Are you there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
If anybody has any questions, it's a good time to ask them. But yeah, I love that, and I love how you kind of talk about joy and playing with it, because I think that's, again, it's like that lighter experience of money. It's just like, well, what can we play with? Like, what can we test out? And so I guess, again, it's like, for people who are feeling stuck with it, like, how do they move into that kind of space of playfulness and joy, and what does that offer?
And see, like this little thing.
Yeah.
my little wand. It's it it's not about the money. It's about bringing the experience of joy and fun in me all the time to remind me of joy. Like the pens that I write with, they're called joy ink. And so surrounding me at all times are things that bring me joy and beauty. And so it's in those ways that like it becomes a lighter thing by being surrounded of the things to remind me of the happiness that exists. And then always is just looking at money as an expression of love.
Mm. Yeah.
That's all money is. And if we could just start operating from a place of money's a way to say thank you, and that money is just an expression of love. I love love. Like nothing is more playful to me than being able to show my appreciation to someone else or to show my gratitude or love to something. And so money's just another way to do that. So if we could just start putting that distinction onto money, instantly turns it into something very playful and very joyful, is that we get to express love through money.
Yeah. And I think even like in my own life, when I've been kind of creating, it's just kind of playing with it. And, you know, you try different things and some of them don't work. And it's realizing, you know, that doesn't really matter. Like you'll just try something else. It's, it's just
It's
simple.
all an experiment. I mean, it's the best way. Everything is just an experiment, and so is money, where it's like, I'm going to try this out, and starting to look at money as, again, it's just this playful thing showing us if it's working or not. It's just it's a friend. It's a friend showing us that something's working or it's not. It's not saying anything about us. It's not saying that we're unworthy. It's just like, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't really working, or, try something different or something else. It's just trying to tell us something. It's not being mean.
Yeah. And again, just staying in that kind of anything is possible, and seeing that, you know, literally anything is possible. There's
Anything is possible.
Yeah, and it's that staying curious, I think, as well. I don't know. It's just curiosity and playfulness, I think, is kind of the answer to everything.
I agree. I love coming through. I always say play because it's always coming through that lens. But curiosity is the greatest way to uncover things, because curiosity sometimes can be something scary. Curiosity isn't always like this shiny thing. Curiosity can be like, oh, I'm not sure and I'm kind of scared, but it's that good scared. It's like something juicy is going to be underneath there. And so like curiosity just covers the whole gamut of emotions. But anytime following curiosity, there's always something good at the end of it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and again, those two words kind of, we talk about unraveling a life we love. It's like those two words kind of sum it up for me. It's like stay curious to what you can see different, and
Yep.
just play with it. Like the more
Yeah.
I showed up having fun, the easier my life got with money in a way as well, because it used to be very serious. Like and again, like even money really played into me burning out with chronic fatigue in a way, because I was just constantly thinking that I had to achieve certain
Mhm.
things, and that was coming from my own judgment. That was still coming from me, like.
Yeah.
And it was just seeing something different that was like, no, now, you're free to create in whatever way you want. And the more I kind of played with it and the more fun I had, even last year, like I was very much kind of working on my book, and I was taking it very seriously, and then I just started having fun with it, and
Yep.
the whole dynamic just shifted, because I kind of realized halfway through, I was like, this is like, your entire message is about just having fun, like why are you so
Yeah.
serious? Like I'd kind of fallen, because you kind of fall into that rabbit hole, don't you? There's always somewhere,
It is.
don't
Oh,
you?
it's absolutely true. And I get to really, I'm working on a book right now about money, and I have to remind myself, and this is what I teach, and I have to remind myself like, oh, this isn't working because you're not having fun. Like you forgot to have the fun. It's almost like, when doing something, there's this seriousness that has to come in. And sometimes I have to remind myself. And again, that's why I have these little things like a wands or little reminders of fun, because it can go into that serious mode. And the same thing happened with me. At a certain point when I realized I'm just not subscribing anymore to just doing things for the sake of money, I gave myself permission to just play. I'm like, I'm not doing it for the end result of money. I am doing it because I genuinely love to do this. And when I follow my joy and my love, money's a natural byproduct of it. Like the money's just going to come. So I don't need to make money goals. I have to just continue being courageous enough to do what I love to do, as outrageous as that is. And just as long as I follow that, then the money's just going to support me, because that's what it's there for.
Yeah. And that's where that element of trust comes in as well. It's like trust and acceptance are kind of
Big time.
crucial things.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So, and I really do
Yeah.
see it. And I think when I first kind of came across this or started thinking about it, I was kind of like, I'm not really sure that I trust this. Like I saw it in so many different areas, but for me, like money was the one thing I was like, no, this definitely doesn't apply. And then over the time I was like, no, it does actually. It really
It
does.
absolutely does.
Yeah. But it's one of those, big topics, I think, that it's not always easy to see it in.
No, and it's a taboo topic. It's one of those topics they say, you don't talk about money, you don't talk about sex, you don't talk about religion. And so it's one of those topics that it's not freely spoken about, and there's so much surrounding it. So there isn't so much of this freedom yet, because it's not a natural topic to talk about, or,
Yeah, like there's this
so
almost social conditioning kind of.
yes, there's a stigma around it. Like, oh, we don't talk about that. Then, and if you do, you're rude, and all of these other things. And the first thing is to start making it a topic to be spoken about, so that we could just remove that first illusion
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. It's all made up.
That's illusion number one. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, has anybody got any questions just before we kind of come to the end? If there's anybody got any, then just drop them in the box. But I think, I've really enjoyed kind of exploring that with you. And it's always interesting, because I have some people who kind of share the 3 principles like I do that come on, and then I have some people who have never heard of the 3 principles, which I don't know if you have. I'm guessing maybe not, or no, but it's always like we always have the same sort of conversation about, there's this natural intelligence, there's this wisdom that's kind of always there, and we've always got it within us, and it's basically the same thing, because for me the principles are just an explanation of how it works. So it's really nice to kind of see that playing out in all areas, and including money. So
Yeah. And that's why I think I love, when there's, like you said, there was an energy that just existed between us. When there's a certain energy, you kind of just know that everyone's doing their work. And the whole point of it is just for people to get to the point of complete self-expression, authenticity, trust, wisdom, freedom.
yeah.
And our vehicles are just different depending on what experiences we've had in our life that spoke to us, that we then teach out in the world. But it all comes back to really just being a beacon of love and light, and just living a life that makes us happy and free.
Yeah, and we're all kind of pointing to the same thing, really, ultimately.
Yep.
That's really cool. Jennifer says, listening with curiosity and looking forward to having more fun with money.
Yes, Jennifer. Follow the fun and the money will follow.
Yeah. That's so cool. I don't think there are any other questions. But thank you so much. That was really, really fun. I enjoyed it. So I think that's always a good sign. What are you, just to finish, what are you working on at the moment that you'd love to share with us?
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I am working on a book. So I am talking about money and coming through in this, teaching my methodology on money, but also just removing the illusion of money, and, steps, and just a different mentality of how to get there. And so that's what I'm currently working on with money. And I'm like super excited with it, because it's just, it's going against the stigma, and it's talking about something that, isn't a topic that's meant to be talked about. And I'm just like, bullshit. Like, let's talk about this. And let's talk about money wants to restore its integrity, and that it's all about fun and play and love, and that there's this new way forward. And so, I'm super excited about that coming out and having that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if people want to hear more from you, where can they find out about you as well?
They could find me on my website, which is www.toniag.com. And then on there, my social media is on there, because I do gifts of the day on my Facebook page, which is just like little mind looking for gratitude in the everyday. And I share money tips and all of that. And also my Instagram is on there. So there's little messages that I just share
Yeah.
just to relate to the abundance of life and see that it's all around us in case,
Yeah.
you could tend to forget. I do too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, because we're human, we get reminded, and then we forget again, and then we
Yeah.
remember. So,
Yep.
and yeah, I'll pop that all in the member vault as well on this module. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm just going to introduce the next speaker. So feel free to go if you need to go, but I'm just going to chat a little bit quickly about who we've got next week. So
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for allowing me to play with you all. It's been a pleasure.
thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, so next Friday, the 13th of March, at 8 p.m. GMT, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, we are joined by Kate Taylor, who is a life design coach. I love Kate because she's kind of fully herself. She's like just this creative expression. We're talking about joy and things now. It's like she is that. And she just playfully creates and does so much. She has a practical magic deck that offers a beautiful reminder of people's wisdom. And she's also creator of the Awakening Festival in the Isle of Wight, which is where I'm speaking later this year, actually. But she has also got a really amazing story, which I can't wait for her to share, about what made her realize the importance of self-care and compassion. She describes herself as a lover of disco balls, a bright red lip, and more leopard print than is necessary. So she's, she also talks about living a big, bold, beautiful life, which you can kind of get from that. She's an empowerment coach, creative coach, writer, and speaker. She's on a one-woman mission to help others live a life full of creative expression in order to live well, work well, and feel good. It says, expect magic, big hugs, fierce loyalty, more than a few F-bombs and an impromptu dance break every now and again. So yeah, that's who we've got next week. So hope you guys enjoyed today, and that's all for now. But if you have any questions, then do just kind of drop them in either the Self-Rediscovery Facebook group or on the member vault, and I will see you next week. Lots of love.